Krish. Hi, Ashley. This is Sarah Dillon. Thank you so much for giving me opportunity to at least virtually one way meet you and answer these wonderful, very thought-provoking 12 questions that you have asked me. I'm sorry, I just pulled brownies off the oven, so I'm going to set these aside, although unfortunately this is virtual. Otherwise, I would love to share them with you all. Well, I'll get straight to it and start answering all of your questions. So, in 5 years, I see myself in full transparency and honesty as an operator of a Chick-fil-A. Over the course of the past several months, has the Lord really reaffirmed and constantly confirmed that this is a path I really have been looking for, and all of the pieces have simply fell together, and the Holy Spirit really has solidified these in my heart. And so once I really feel so strongly about that, am I very committed to that path. And so in 5 years, I would love to be an operator of a Chick-fil-A. I would love to be very entrenched and immersed in that community in which it is placed in, and spend those subsequent years really growing and fostering that deep-seated connection and presence that Chick-fil-A allows one to be an extension of. In tandem with that, and God willingly, I would love to be a wife and a mother, so serving not only Chick-fil-A in my community, but also my husband and my children that I currently don't have, but that I trust the Lord in due time will provide. And so in 5 years, a Chick-fil-A operator, a wife, and a mother, that would be huge prayers and huge blessings answered. So the word stewardship means to me holistically leveraging, managing, and utilizing both the intangible and tangible resources that God has gifted a person, in which case me, with. So through using those, leveraging those, managing those in such a way that glorifies God, it often yields, that glory yields flourishing to all. So that is what I believe stewardship to look like, that it is not a negative mentality, it is not a deficit area, but instead it's an abundance mentality. It is a communal flourishing for all. So that would therefore indicate to me, the stewarder of such things, intangibles such as effort, time, commitments, as well as tangible resources, money, locations, spaces, external things as well, that they are, one, and first and foremost, committed to the Lord, and secondly, better and glorify His creation. So leadership, for me, looks first and foremost like sacrificial servanthood. It is the communal shepherding of a group, of an entity, towards our larger goal. So a leader in that position, not only is the visionary, but also the curator of the culture. So while the leader is moving along this group of people or entity towards an end goal, along the way they are curating, they are the holder of particular facets of this culture that is the day-to-day of an overarching leadership, right? And so beyond that, leadership looks like, for me, in both word and deed, sacrificial, putting oneself far last, allowing everybody else first, sacrificing on behalf of yourself for the good, for the betterment of the whole. But also, on the contrary, I do believe that also looks like the 99-1. While, yes, a leader, in my opinion, leads in this humble confidence, this humble decision-making that makes and guides and leads along the way for the bettering of the 99, it never forgets the one. It always goes back, fights for, advocates, and restores that one. Very much, I was telling Ashley about the book A Shepherd's Look at Psalm 23, and it explains a lot as to why the biblical metaphors obviously describe Christ, and then Christ later deems himself as the Good Shepherd, and how the Good Shepherd, regardless of the flourishing, of the betterment of the 99, of the whole of the flock, never allows one sheep to go lost. And for me, that very much informs what leadership looks like, that protecting, that serving very much first rather than being on the pedestal, being in the light. More so, in my opinion, a leader should be more discreet in terms of not being able to necessarily identify from the exterior, not being the face, the loud voice, the etc. Though it can look differently, of course, in many different ways, and there's certainly many different styles. But for me, the curator of the culture, the communicator, the interconnector of all the various pieces to the people of this very intricate web that is weaved. And that also then leads me into what community looks like. Although I think we usually consider community to look like people, I believe it is an entity, a group, a collective body of God's creation that are bound together. Now, for me, that community is bound together. That glue that binds, that holds and intertwines, is an undying commitment to the other, meaning that we are connected in a community for something larger than ourselves. Therefore, it will endure all the various circumstances that can come our way. And so in this case, I think of a Christian community. We're bound together by our commitment and our servanthood and our submittance and our obedience to the Lord first. And therefore that bind is so strong. So it's that glue that holds us together. And it's a commitment that doesn't waver. I commit to loving the other person, to supporting them before myself, before everybody else. Beyond that, I believe a community is especially evident and is especially necessary in good times and bad, when circumstances are poor, when there is scarcity, when there is difficulty on the horizon, when we are weathering the storms. That is when, in my opinion, a community, rather than diminishing, actually shines. It comes to the forefront. It exemplifies those strong binds and bonds that hold, and it grows them. And that it should be constantly growing, and that it should be constantly, one, diversifying, but also two, growing. Not only growing exponentially, but also internally. It should be growing more in love and grace and commitment towards one another. Therefore, the ripple effect occurs in creating this large holistic community, in my opinion. Excellence, I really do not believe can be measured. I believe it is a relative term. Therefore, when I define excellence, I don't believe it can be measured nor necessarily scored. Sure, it just depends on what it is we are looking at. But data does not deem, in my opinion, excellence. For me, excellence, actually, I would define it as the ability to persevere, grit, that tenacity, that commitment to keep striving, to keep growing, to keep improving and bettering, and that is never arrivable. When something is excellent, when anything has ever been, quote, excellence for me, it hasn't been in this being a recipient of a prize or an award, because that's merely symbolic. For me, excellence is that process to constant growth. It is a commitment. It is grit. It is the ability in which to pursue when failures arise. Typically, in my opinion, excellence is being able to fail, to try again, and to fail, and to try again, to eventually become successful at what it is you're striving towards. But for me, once again, excellence is neither measurable nor scored, nor is it linear, or is it beginning and an end. For me, it's this ongoing process that is a commitment, an undying and unwavering commitment to betterment, to improvement, and the ability to see things through and to persevere those challenges and those hardships. Excellence is the ability to be able to pursue through those to another place that gets you somewhere else, and is that journey and the ability in which to constantly recommit, to redefine, to reorient oneself to that, I believe deems excellence. Humility is such a buzzword, I believe, and so According to me, in my Christian lens and perspective on obedience, that first and foremost, humility looks like submitting and being obedient before the Lord. That for me looks like putting my wants, my desires, my plan, my control, my effort, my time, my every aspect of what I am able to have a grasp on this life, what I'm able to control, that looks like submitting that to the Lord first. And when I do so, do I then, I believe, enter that space of obedience and humility. And from that, does all of the other aspects of my Christian humility flow. This looks like, because I submit myself to the Lord, His ways, His goals first, I am then able to prioritize, to put others before myself, to sacrifice on their behalf. That opens me up to be able to, in this human life, on the ground level, humbly serve others, to think of them before myself, to listen first before I speak, to hear, to prioritize others' wants and needs before my very own. But the key for me is that humility begins internally, processed with the Lord first, and then from which everything else flows to those around me and to those circumstances around me. It also, I believe, also has an internal whiplash as well. It is being in a constant state of self-improvement. It is constantly seeking out ways in which I fall short, my reoccurring shortcomings, to be very intentional in committing myself to a journey of self-growth and growing in self-awareness and self-improvement, that in turn rids me or also draws me away from my very narrow-minded thinking and perspective, like I'm a horse with blinders on. But instead, and that also, might I add, is a very shaky platform, right? A very shaky pedestal, this very arrogant and prideful place that is so easy for me to fall into. But in turn, through humbly submitting myself to the Lord, and then humbly being able to submit myself in servitude to everybody else in the circumstances around me, does the Lord then instill within me this humble confidence that I'm part of something greater than myself, that's doing things so much far greater and for better, mind-blowing reasons and purposes than my own, that I could ever want, that I could ever even dream up, essentially. And so that humility for me looks like constantly reevaluating, reorienting myself to God and to others first before myself. And it's a difficult, I think, ongoing journey of sanctification within the Christian life that I think is perhaps one of the most important, or if not one of the pillars of this human existence. With that being said, I think it certainly sets me well up into articulating my greatest weakness. One of my many, because I have plenty. One of my greatest weakness is my sense of control. I think and like to fool myself into patterns of behavior that suggest to me that leadership looks like control. It looks like controlling those around me and controlling my circumstances and all those things that I think I can have, in doing all of that rather than leading from this place of humility, that I don't control it all, that I can't, nor will I ever, and when I do try to do so, rather than steward it, which looks very different, that is where my weaknesses certainly surface. I would also say that I've grown a lot in this way, such as learning that a leader does not look like me being the doer of everything. In fact, a very effective, impactful, and that very deep-seated holistic leader I was earlier defining actually comes to the forefront when I'm able to step back as the leader and my team actually grow and thrive better without me. That I'm a teacher first, and that they grow and that they are learning and they are implementing all of those things in which I taught, rather than if I leave that I'm removed from it, everything collapses. But in fact, I left a place better than I walked into before, that is neither dependent upon my leadership nor presence, but in fact, because of my leadership and my presence, did that lasting impact trickle down and was picked up and carried forward. And so for me, that is a way in which my weakness has grown, but that I will very